John 8:9. Audientes autem unus post unu exiebant, incipientes a senioribus, et remansit solus, et mulier in medio stans. But they, hearing these things, began to go away one after another, beginning from the older men, and he alone remained, as well as the woman standing in the midst or before him. The people we're beginning with here in audientes are the accusers of the woman caught in adultery. We're still in the midst of that story. Jesus has just said very provocatively, "Let those among you who are without sin be the first to cast a stone at her." And this is what they're hearing. That is to say, the previous verse. So hearing this, those accusers went away, exiebant. And we can say, began to go away here with some justification, not only because we have beginning actually in the next phrase, but because whenever we've got the imperfect tense, it's okay to interpret inchoative action. That's what the imperfect tense signifies. Action that's not finished, or that's ongoing, or that's proceeding, or that's gradual. So they began to go away, and notice we've got a plural subject here, even though for this idiom, we're going to jump down to the singular, one after another. It's quite clear that this is still a collective group of people. You can't have one after another unless you've got a large group of people, right? So unus post unum is an idiom that is sort of interesting. I won't go too deeply into this, but it's interesting to me because a cursory search has revealed that this phrase is not actually apparently attested in the classical literature, which has come down to us, which surprised me because it seems quite natural and idiomatic. I don't know if that's because it's actually a post-classical idiom, or if it's because it was a classical idiom, it just happens by chance not to be represented in the small slice of classical literature that's come down to us. I'm not sure. One of our standard lexicons, interestingly, lists it as an idiom, but doesn't, unusually, give any particular examples or citations for where it occurs, which is a little bit suspicious to me. It's something I might look a little bit further into. But for our purposes, the meaning is clear, right? One after another. One could probably have said also in Latin, singuli, or maybe even better, we could use the adverb derived from this word, singulatim, one by one. But for whatever reason, what we've got here is unus post unum. They began to go away, beginning, and again, this consorts naturally with the sense of the imperfect tense verb that we've just seen, beginning from the older folks, from the older guys. And after that happened, he alone, and we know this has got to be Jesus because this is a masculine adjective, right? He alone remained there. Also, the mulier, the woman herself, in medio stans. So she's standing there, but we've got to say, well, what can in medio mean? Because we're used perhaps to seeing in medio in contexts where there's a lot of people. For instance, if we were to use in medio in a context where we've got the mulier, we've got Jesus, and we've got all these accusers, this makes sense, right? We'd say she was standing in their midst, in the middle of them, which is what in medio literally often means. But we don't have a crowd of people anymore. This is, in fact, what's being emphasized here is that all these accusers have gone away because none of them, presumably, is without sin. But Jesus is still there. And so for in medio, we have to do what most English translations do, which is say something like before him, or maybe in his presence. She's standing there. And in medio, in fact, is used this way all the time in Latin texts. You don't need a crowd, in other words, to say in medio, because it can mean before somebody or in their presence, or maybe a way to think of it is sort of front and center in American English. You know, the focus, the spotlight is on this person who is there, who is present, who's the focus of attention. Maybe the idea, if we could express it most essentially, is just that, the focus of attention here. And as we're going to see in the next verse, the key part of this whole episode is, in fact, what Jesus says to this woman.